Why do you think this is that the people in this country have really taken you to their hearts more than they have back home?
You know, Raj, I wish I knew, and then I'd have an avenue of thanking these people. I I really don't know. I can say this, and I'm again uh, thankful that I have the opportunity on your show to thank the wonderful people of England for remembering me and for supporting my songs and my records through the years. Uh, Thank you is mighty small words, but you know that's about all you can come up with. Uh, they've really been wonderful to me. I've looked forward every trip to coming to England. There was one time when I was here in '63 that when I went back home, I actually talked to my wife about moving over here. I just fell in love with the country. I really did. The people, it's great.
Getting very sentimental, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, but I like it that way.
Sure. Okay, Dixie Fried coming up in just a second.
Fine.
Right, Carl, you were telling us a little anecdote about Bob Dylan when the microphone wasn't on. We must go over that again.
It was, gosh, I don't know, Raj. It must have been 6, 7 years ago. We were in New York City. I was at that time working with my friend Johnny Cash, and we were doing a craft television show. And I had never met Bob. We took a break from the taping, and we went up to the dressing room, and a fellow by the name of Bob Johnson was the A&R man for Johnny Cash as well as Bob Dylan back then. And he said, they got a fellow in the dressing room that came to meet you fellas. And we walked in, and there stood little Bob. And I almost fainted because I admired the fellow and his writing. He really, to me, has always been an outstanding songwriter as well as a performer. And we said hello, and John had to go out of the room to talk about the show just a few minutes after then. And Dylan and I were sitting on a couch in the dressing room there, and he said, Carl, I'll tell you something you may not know. Said you probably don't, because there wasn't very many of the records ever put out. But the first song I ever recorded was one of your songs called Matchbox Blues. And, of course, there, as I said a moment ago, is another highlight. Plus, right after that, he said, I've started a song that I wish you'd finish, that I'm hung up with it. I can't get any farther. And we had an old guitar in the dressing room, and I recorded this song on it's on an album, I forget which one, but it's called Champaign, Illinois. And it starts, I got a woman in Morocco, I got a woman out in Spain. The woman I love stole my heart, she lives up in Champaign. Well, I wrote he had 2 verses, and I wrote 3 verses of that song in the dressing room. And I've found out since then it's one of the few songs that anybody ever had the distinction of writing with Bob Dylan. Yeah.
The stories are endless, I'm sure, right? Because we're going to play a version of Matchbox now that you may not have heard in a while. There was a time when they did a session together, Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan, and you were playing on the session as well, right?
Right.
And they released one track from that session, which was on Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline album. They did a version of Girl from the North Country. You also did some other songs, amongst which...
that was a great session. They did kind of like they used to back in the old Sun days. They just turned the machines on, and we just sat and talked, and just we really enjoyed it. It was about a 3-hour session.
Okay.
But it was a lot of fun.
And it came out sounding like this.
Sitting here wondering where the matchbox hold my clothes. Well, I'm sitting here wondering where the matchbox hold my clothes. Said Carl, match it, but I got a long way to go.
Well, was it like you remembered it?
Yeah, it just seemed like it happened last night. It really did. Sounds better than I remembered it sounding when we recorded it.
Sounds so friendly.
Yeah, well, that's the way it was, man. We just we told jokes. Of course, they had to cut a lot of that out, but we just talked in between records, and John would say, "Bob, you remember this song?" And that's the way it was done. It was kind of like an album I did one time, Raj, in New York. I'd never met a group called the NRBQ. Columbia asked me would I like to go up to New York City and record with this group. I said, yeah, man, sure. And they flew me up there, and I went in the studio, and when I was walking down the hall, I heard this band, man. They were playing, I think, Matchbox or Honey Don't, and they too knew every record I'd ever done. And this session with them, which there was an album released with the NRBQ, was the same type of thing. We just sat down and just, came up with the songs, and there was no rehearsing. The rehearsing was done right there. The rehearsing was put out. That's the album. That's the way it was.
Okay, one of those tracks coming up after this. Carl Perkins, NRBQ, and All Mama's Children. Now then, I think we can settle something once and for all. There are many legends surrounding Sun Records and what actually went on there when Elvis was there, and you were there, and Johnny Cash was there. And the story that has gone round such a long time about the $1 Million Quartet, that all of you playing together on a Sun session. The tapes have never seen the light of day, of course. Nobody's ever heard them. It did actually happen, yes.
Yeah, it sure did, Roger. And I remember very well, it was the session that, there's a lot of things happened that day. It's the session that I recorded Matchbox. And as I told you a while ago, that's the first time that Sam Phillips heard Jerry Lee Lewis sing was on that session. And during, just at the time the session was about through, which back in those days was not like it is now, a 3 or 4 hour session. We just went in and locked the doors, and you'd stay all night. You'd stay till everybody felt like, well, I can't play any longer, and then he'd shut it off. But Elvis came in the studio, which was not unusual back in those days. It was kind of a little family of people there, and everybody was pulling for everybody. But Elvis had already gone to a lot bigger and better things with Victor, and he had just played out in Las Vegas, and he came back to Memphis. And he came in the studio, and Elvis sat down at the piano. I was playing guitar, and my little band was playing too, my brothers and the drummer, who is now the drummer with Johnny Cash. And we started singing some of the old religious songs, things like I'll Fly Away, give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion. And it was just an impromptu thing, like some of the sessions we've been talking about. And really, none of us knew that Sam had the machines on, but he did. And there was a lot of talking in between, and then we'd stop a song if we ran out, if somebody didn't know the verses, or make them up as we went. But I did hear the tape after I heard a lot of it. And there is, until this day, somewhere, probably in a bank vault in Memphis, Tennessee, there is a good hour or an hour and a half of songs by Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee, Elvis, and I.